Hi guys, welcome back. So, as promised, I'm trying to be consistent. You okay? Who's that pretty girl? Who is that? Oh, it's okay. One video that I really wanted to do is a birth story video. I did not take any footage. My hospital would not allow me to videotape. And honestly, I had such a traumatic birth that like I wouldn't have done it anyway. But I have like some pictures and stuff. I'll try to insert them if I can find them. But I have had people interested in hearing my birth story because it is very long, about 40 hours. And it resulted in like a week-long hospital stay. It was an induction and a C-section, emergency C-section. So it was a lot. So I'm gonna kind of get into those details, and I'm in a better mood because, just a little side note, I had some issues with my disability for my maternity leave, and I was really stressing about it because obviously it's Christmas and, you know, it's a paycheck. So I finally got it squared away today and I am feeling a lot better. So that's good. Much happier. So I'm sipping my coffee in my cup that I got from Etsy. It says today's goal, keep the tiny humans alive. And it's by Tracy on Etsy. So I'll link her shop below. I've actually bought a few things from there. I bought my grandma a gift, and then I got her ornament. Autumn, it says Autumn Rose. It's really beautiful. I will link a picture. In the holiday spirit, you can see my living room is fully decorated. If you guys are interested, I will do a house tour, Christmas house tour, whatever. Not too crazy, just because, you know, obviously I'm busy taking care of her. But I do have quite a bit decorated as we're gonna have Christmas at our house. So let's start from the beginning. I did go my full term. Around 38 weeks, my doctor started talking about induction. Now the reason he did that is because he believed that we shouldn't go past 40 weeks, and at that point I was not progressing. So he was concerned. And she was big already. So he said like she was in a really high percentile. She was like almost 8 pounds already. And he didn't want her to get any larger. So he wanted me to be induced. So on September 23rd, I believe, September 22nd, we went into the hospital and we were scheduled to be induced. I was so excited. I was so excited. It took a while to get me in because there was a lot of like births going on. By the time I finally got in, I was so ready to get her out and meet her. We were so excited, so ready. Well, we were induced via Cervidil, which is essentially a pill that they insert vaginally, and then it basically like dilutes and it is supposed to open your cervix. They did that for like a day. Did nothing. The only thing it did is that you had to stay in bed for I think like an hour to let it, you couldn't go pee, you couldn't get up, you had to lay in bed, and then you had to go walk for an hour. And then you got checked, which is extremely painful for those of you who have not been checked. Getting cervix checks is extremely painful. So they would come in, check, not dilated, for me, not dilated, and then they would insert another pill, and then you would start the whole process over again. And this is through the day and the night, so 24 hours a day you're doing this. No progress, none. So then they started me on Pitocin. So by then, Pitocin kicks in, my doctor comes in, says, you have only progressed to like a 4 at this point with like the Pitocin and stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and break your water. Now that sounds fine and dandy. However, he broke my water in like within like 5 seconds of telling me he's gonna break my water. Now, let me clear that up. So he said, I'm gonna break your water, while he was like checking my cervix, pulls out the tool to break the water, whatever it is, thing, pokey thing, and he pierces my water and breaks it. It was terrifying. I had already been told by family who had been through inductions not to get your water broken unless you already have your epidural, which I did not. They said the contractions come on extremely strong by then, and I really hadn't had any contractions by then. So I was terrified. I was so terrified. So he breaks my water, and like within an hour, just the contractions just come in a wave, right? And I'm dilating, but not a lot. So I'm having horrible contractions. At one point I was up all night crying and screaming with Aaron and my mom. My mom was with us, and I was crying and I was like, I know I'm having contractions. Well, the nurses didn't have, I don't know if they like didn't have it hooked up right, or it was like malfunctioning, the machine that basically they can track to see my contractions. It wasn't functioning properly, so they weren't able to see how severe my contractions were. They thought I was just kind of had like a low pain tolerance, even though I told them I did not. I have a really high pain tolerance. So they basically said, okay, let's see if we can like figure this out. Then it comes to find out, oh my God, you are having really big contractions. We need to get you a freaking epidural, which is what I've been telling them, right? Sweetest nurses, not bagging on the nurses, but it did suck that they couldn't track my freaking contractions because I was dying. So they get my epidural. I'm still not dilating. So at this point, I think I was at like a 5.5 or something, which is not, you have to get to 12. So like, come on. Ultimately, long story short, with the dilation, I ended up at a 6 and I stopped. The doctor came in, he said, look, we're gonna try for a little bit longer, but at this point, we cannot go beyond like 24 hours with your water broken because we are risking infection because the amniotic sac has ruptured. So at that point, you know, we're risking an infection, we're risking her heart rate going up or going down or whatever, right? Her vitals becoming unstable and risking your life as well. So you and baby are at risk at this point is essentially what he was saying. So I'm terrified. My whole family's there at this point and they're trying not to be scared, but they are because we all knew what that meant. Now, for some people, you know, a C-section might not be that scary for them. They might have already expected it, or then maybe that's what they want because they feel like it's easier. For me, I didn't expect that. I always picture myself having a vaginal delivery. I always thought it was going to go smoothly. I just didn't think it was going to be like that. Well, the nurse comes in and says, all right, this is it. It's like 12 midnight or so. She's like, this is it. We got to check you again. And if you're not dilated past a 6 at this point, you know, your doctor's going to probably recommend that we do an emergency C-section. The baby, she was coming at, like, I could feel her like making her way down, and I was like probably to a point where if I dilated more I could push, but it wasn't happening. So she was engaged, like she was engaged to be delivered vaginally, but it just wasn't happening. And I was so scared, like you guys, like I could probably tear up and have an anxiety attack just thinking about how I felt in that moment. So my doctor comes in. At this point, I've had the epidural. I don't know if I said that already. Probably not. Probably skipping around. My doctor comes in and basically says, okay, we got to do it. Like, you know, I warned you that this could be a possibility and you want to go forward. And I'm like, I get it. It's fine. But it wasn't fine. I was freaking out. I was so scared. But I just wanted her to be okay. So I kept telling my boyfriend, I don't care. I'm okay as long as I can have my baby be healthy, right? That's all any mother, parent wants, you know. So yeah, so they come in with this scary stretcher and they wheel me into the OR, the operating room, down the hall, which was only down the hall, and I kept looking at it like, how scary is that? When I was like doing my walking down the hallway when I thought it was gonna have her normally. So they wheel us into the OR and they're all getting scrubbed up, and at that point, remember, I had an epidural. So when you have an epidural, you don't additionally get a spinal block, which is what you would typically get with a C-section. With a C-section straight away, so like with my next child, I'll have a C-section and I'll just have a spinal tap, right? But an epidural, you can't have both. So I had to get my epidural basically refilled, kind of topped off. And I was scared because I had looked it up, of course. And they said, you know, the chances of you feeling it or you, getting pain back are greater when you just have an epidural. She's a little upset because she has hiccups. I promise my baby's usually happier. You hate hiccups, I know. I'm sorry. You look like a little chunk right now. Hi, Autumn. Hi, Autumn. You want this? guys, her little floofy butt. It's so cute. Her little Christmas pants. I will say, in order to kind of make sure that you can't feel, they prick you with some like needles, almost like acupuncture, which I've never had, but like more painful, to see if I had any feeling, and see if they needed to add any more epidural. And it turned out that I was pretty much ready to go. Scared, but ready to go. So the process itself, I would say I was more in my head about it than anything. I think it was more anxiety and fear of the unknown than it was actually a scary experience. Now, it was scary because I didn't know what was gonna happen, and it was fast, but it wasn't painful, right? The one thing about a C-section that I wish I could have known or looked into was the tugging experience, the tugging sensation. Because you can't feel anything, all you really feel is like a pressure or a pulling, because they are obviously making incisions into your uterus and into, you know, fat and your stomach. It is it's major abdominal surgery, so it is intense. They are pulling the baby out, they're stitching, they're doing all that stuff. So you want to be aware of that. It's a little strange. It's not painful, you know, obviously they go through that whole thing I discussed earlier to make sure that you can't feel anything, but it is scary. You have a drape so you can't see what's going on. My boyfriend did look at one point and he said he had to look away because it was just very strange. They got her out. When I heard her cry for the first time, I was shocked. Like, I couldn't even believe I did all that. Like, I went through all that. 40 hours later, when all of that was done and over with, hearing her cry was the most amazing experience of my life, hands down. I can't even begin to tell you. 8 pounds, 20 inches, 8 pounds, 1 ounce, 20 inches. Full head of hair, just like a beautiful child. Couple minutes went by and they basically said, we're gonna let you see her, take a photo, but we have to take her to the Nicu right now. She's having trouble breathing, basically. So they kind of like were suctioning her airway and let me see her, and I took a picture and then they took her. And one of mine and Aaron's rules from the beginning was follow her wherever she goes. So if she needs to go, you go with her. I'll be fine. She needs you more. So he did. He went to the NICU with her stuff, and then they wheeled me to the recovery room. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have any way of knowing what was going on with my child at all. And I was not concerned with myself. At that point, I'd been up for basically almost 40 hours, and I was exhausted, so I was falling asleep, and I was drugged up, and I was like just delusional basically at that point. I was more concerned with Autumn and where she was. So my boyfriend came, brought me my phone, and told me, like, she's okay, your family's in there, like, seeing her. They just monitored me. And the nurse that I was with was extremely supportive. She was telling me about her story and her difficult labors and just holding my hand through the whole process because I was scared. They wheeled me back to the recovery room, or back to our hospital room where I met Aaron and Autumn, and I was out of it. Like, I was so out of it. And then I started getting a lot of pain, but I was so obsessed with her that I just didn't even think about it, right? So the next day I'm like up and, you know, we're doing stuff with her. We're changing her, we're feeding her, doing all that. And I was just so happy. I just remember feeling like, okay, this is right? This is great. Well, in the afternoon, Aaron's mom and his aunt came to visit, and my aunt was there. And my aunt has Down syndrome. She's great. I'll have to do a video with her one day. So the three of them are with me. Aaron had left to go pick up his car that was in the shop. And I was feeding Autumn, and she'd been kind of like spitting up a lot, which I just thought was normal, right? I'm a first time mom. He and I didn't really think anything of it. She'd been spitting up and coughing, kind of like, you know, like gagging. But it just kept happening. Like, she wasn't keeping any food down, and she looked like she was struggling to breathe. So I basically called the nurses in, and I was like, dude, something's wrong. At that point, my IV, because I had an IV in my hand, and then they had poked me like 5 times to try the IV because my veins were bad. I had an IV in my hand and it was falling out. So there was literally blood dripping everywhere, but I was holding her with the other hand, feeding her, and she started choking. Like, she wasn't choking, but she was like struggling to keep food down and to eat. So I said, I gotta get up and find the nurses. And of course, like, you know, his mom, his aunt, my aunt don't know what to do. Like, they're not her mom, so they're not like gonna jump in and be like, here, let me take over and help. You know, they just didn't really know. So I got up, wheeled my IV cart to the door, to the hallway, because like I couldn't really get anybody in. And I have my baby in one arm and my like bleeding arm on the other side. And I call the nurses over and I say, something is wrong with my baby. I don't know what's going on, but you need to come in and see how she feeds. So I'm feeding her and she does it again. So the nurse burps her and tries to feed her and see if she'll do the same thing with her. She did. And so they said, okay, we need to like check her airways, and they did all kinds of different tests that, you know, nurses would do. They like just made sure she wasn't too cold. They made sure she didn't have a fever. They made sure she wasn't like coming down with something or she wasn't sick. And then they said, okay, we're gonna have to do blood work, because they had called her pediatrician, who was my pediatrician when I was little, and they asked him what he thinks that they should do. And they said to do blood work. Mind you, they had cleared her from the NICU, discharged her when she was first born, because they said she was fine, that she might have had a little fluid in her lungs, but she was fine. I'm crying because my newborn baby is getting pricked and blood work done, and I'm feeling totally hopeless. I was already exhausted from this long, scary labor, and I just was, So I have like freaking blood all over my gown because of my IV coming out. I'm like in tears, and my boyfriend's still gone. So thankfully he comes back, and it was just a really bad day. I was just like, even thinking about it is just devastating. He comes back in and he's like, where's Autumn? And I explained to him what's going on. So of course he starts freaking out. The nurse brings her back in and says, something's going on. We don't know what it is. We need to make sure she doesn't have an infection. We need to make sure that she doesn't have anything else going on, because this is very strange. And your doctor is ordering that she be readmitted to the NICU for an indefinite period of time. So they admit her to the NICU. We go see her immediately as soon as we can. And they basically tell us, like, she has a ton of fluid in her lungs still. Like, it keeps coming back. And we need to make sure she doesn't have an infection. They did, like, scans on her to make sure, like, in her brain and her body, to make sure her organs were okay. They did all kinds of things. And basically what it came down to was, they believe that her diagnosis was basically a difficult transition from birth. With the C-section, they kind of just like pulled her out of her home, and she wasn't really expecting it. Despite some dilation and her kind of moving down the birth canal, they think that she was just kind of shocked. I guess her system was shocked. Convinced my doctor to let me stay. I basically said, I'm not leaving without my daughter. So I will stay in this hospital and visit her all day as long as I can. With a C-section, you're supposed to stay in the hospital like extra time, usually an extra day or 2 days. That was definitely my first experience with like, I'll do anything for my child. But I was so sick. It was horrible, guys. Like, I can't even, I don't know how, I don't understand how you can be so strong to have a baby in the NICU for like a month or months on end. Like, I don't, even like a week, I don't. It broke my heart. I cried myself to sleep every night. I did not sleep. I basically just waited until the next time I could see her. I was inconsolable. Like, my boyfriend could not do anything to help me, and it was horrible. And he had to hold it together because he was upset, but I was so devastated by the whole experience, and in so much pain, that he really had to like step up, and I'm so proud of him. And my family was they're like, we have so much, we already had respect for him, but now it's like grown immensely because he's so awesome. So I think it was like day 3 or day 4 that she was in the NICU. The doctor basically said, look, it's a hard transition. She seems to be doing better. She's not on oxygen. She did have a little tube in her nose, but that was kind of to clear out the fluid in her lungs. But he's like, I'm giving her a clean bill of health. She's okay. Just kind of watch her, obviously, more than you would a normal newborn. And we did like some little short trainings in the NICU, like car seat stuff and like CPR and things like that. And then they discharged us, and the nurses were amazing. I wouldn't have gotten through it without them just being like, hey, this is normal. This happens all the time. Because the last thing that I expected was to have a full-term baby in the NICU. I didn't know how often that happens. Then my friends are coming out of the woodworks telling me and reminding me of their birth stories of, you know, their 40-weeker, 39-weeker with trouble breathing or amniotic fluid in their lungs. Hi, Hades. Transitions were hard for her, definitely. And again, my mindset was the hardest thing for me to get over, was my fear. So after going through that with her, I was traumatized every time she would cough or seemed to be choking. I would like tense up and freak out because I thought something was happening. I had to really work with that. Very healthy, happy baby. She's 10 weeks now. She'll be 11 weeks on Friday. Thriving. Our doctor was very concerned about her, so we went to her first appointment, her 2-week checkup. He was like, hey, I just wanted you to know, like, I prayed for you guys, and I was really concerned for her. I didn't want to tell you at the time, but like I said earlier, he was my pediatrician when I was a child, so him and I have a special connection, and, you know, anyway, so he was really invested in Autumn, and if it wasn't for him acting so swiftly, I don't know what could have happened. So, but after like a month, I got diagnosed with PPA and PPD, so postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, and I was put on medication, and I've been doing really well. I'll do a video about that for sure. Anxiety and depression are something that I was already diagnosed with pre-pregnancy, so I wasn't too shocked, and I even warned like my medical team that this was what was going on beforehand. That's pretty much it. I feel like I just rambled on, but I hope it's a coherent story. That's always my fear when I do these videos. When you go back to edit them, like, is it coherent? But yeah, again, do not let this video scare you. If this is something that either you know you're gonna have a C-section or you're being induced, do not let this scare you. Every birth is different. Every birth is different. And no two situations are exactly alike. Everybody's gonna be different. I have had people who were induced right after me that I knew that had a smooth, like 1 or 2 day induction, and they were in and out. Vaginal delivery, healthy baby, no NICU, nothing like that. I've also had friends who had C-sections, like I said, whose babies had amniotic fluid and were in the hospital for a week and stuff like that. So I've had a lot of... I've heard a lot of different stories, and I know that everybody's different. Be aware of how your mind affects you, and look at this and realize that this is what you have to look forward to. Okay, she's so angry, but normally she's not, okay? Like, subscribe, comment below. If you have any other questions, I can do a follow-up, and I can also answer your questions via comments. Again, my name is Ashley. This is Autumn, and we are gonna get out of here so we can go edit and clean and play. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great Christmas season. Bye.